All right. Hey guys, how's it going? Awesome. I am hot on both here now. This is going to be an interesting episode for you. Happy Mother's Day. That's a question. Is it a happy Mother's Day? Is it? Are you happy? Did you talk to your mom today? That's good. Good. So this is going to be an interesting episode given my personal relationship with my mom. So before I go and kill the vibe, seriously, happy Mother's Day to all the mothers out there. And I asked my sister what the subject should be on this podcast. She is a listener, Sarah. I asked her what I should do, and she said Mother's Day, considering that my mom and me don't have a relationship at all really anymore, which we will get to. And some of you have heard in previous episodes uh, the deal with that. But I'm just going to go way more in depth in it in this one because it's Mother's Day. Yeah. All right. Um, so Sarah said I should talk about Mother's Day. Good idea. I have a strange situation there. But I called my stepmom, wished her a happy Mother's Day. She has been much better to me than I have deserved. And I posted on Facebook, I was a shitty kid. I was a pretty bad kid. And she was much better to me than I really deserved. And that's a story of its own. But she's been a great mom. She brings me records all the time. She has truly been, as I said on my Facebook post, the great example of what a mom should be, and for me and my sisters, and one of my sisters is about to be a mother as well, and I'm happy that she got to witness somebody who actually does this thing right. And I say somebody who does this thing right because I would guess that most moms do the right thing. I would say, and in my situation is I don't know. I'm jumping the gun here, but thinking that most of the mothers out there are probably very wholesome people and good people, and I am so glad for those moms. But I have a different situation. So I love my stepmom. She is fantastic, and I thank God that she exists. But as for my birth mother, sponsored by Traditional Medicinals Throat Coat Tea with lemon echinacea, by the way, and honey. Um, as for my birth mother, I'm going to go out on a limb and assume that most listeners have a very good relationship with their mother. And this was a fantastic day for them, getting to talk to their mom and wishing them happy Mother's Day and feeling that love and all of that. And I'm sure that that is most of the case, or the case with most of the listeners. So my my story with my actual mom, what she had done, and how that led to how that sort of led to a certain lifestyle for me. And since most of you have probably heard that episode, I'm not gonna tell the entire. I'm not going down that whole road. But since I released that episode before I started doing the YouTube thing, I am gonna go, and do a small recap. So, all right, when I was 2 years old, I'm gonna say this first. I'm not saying these things to gain pity or to make people feel sorry for me. I'm just saying these things to inform people that there are other situations. So keep that in mind. So my mom left my dad and me when I was 2 years old. Apparently, she had had an affair, and she was the bookkeeper for my dad's business, and she started taking money from my dad's business, checks that were written to his business, and depositing them in a personal account. And for like the last month that her and my dad were together, she did this with his checks and took the money and gave that money to the guy that she was having the affair with. And he ended up, the guy that she had the affair with ended up becoming my stepdad, who in the end was a great dude. And I feel as bad for him as I do the rest of our family. And when I say our family, I'm not referring to my dad's side. I mean like my stepbrother and my family on that side. Like I feel equally as bad because of how she fooled all of us. But so basically my mom had nothing to do with me throughout my developmental years, like my younger years. I remember literally like packing my clothes to go to see her for the weekend and her not showing up and whatever have you. And I remember like just whatever, sitting by the door waiting for her to show up and she wouldn't come. And I don't know. I remember that as a kid. And then I know this. I'm just getting flashbacks of saying this in the last episode that I covered this, but sorry to go over this again. If it's boring for you, I apologize. But so I got in this car accident when I was 8 years old, and pretty much the doctors were not expecting me to pull through this thing, and I was practically in a coma, and I was supposed to have assistance, like with everything. I don't know. I might be just remembering this wrong, and I'm not exaggerating or attempting to, but this was just a bad situation. I had a bad head injury, and it was just a bad situation. So there ended up being a large sum of money that came out of this car accident. And I, as a kid, you don't think about money when you're a kid. You recycle your plastics, by the way, as always. So you don't think about money when you're a kid. And I didn't realize that it was a thing. But I do remember that my mom started coming around again. And by that time, I was getting a little bit older. And my stepbrother, we were hanging out a lot. And I mean, that was awesome because I'd always wanted a brother. And we were getting to hang out a lot then. So that was great. And I was literally just obsessed with that idea of that life, just like going and, doing whatever. It was like something that was different. And for a kid, I guess, that did the same things all the time, something different was fun, and that idea was great. But anyway, I wanted to go and move in with my mom shortly after that. So this ended up driving a wedge sort of between me and my dad's side of the family at this point. I think and looking back, I can see, it's like, oh, I'm choosing someone different. And obviously in the end, I look back and I'm like, wow, that was, and I'm glad that I did it just so, because other relationships that I built with like my stepdad's family and all that side, who were great people and who I love dearly. And I would have never gotten to experience life with those people outside of doing that. So I'm glad that I did that. But looking back, I can totally see why my dad and my grandmother and like my dad's side of the family sort of tried to warn me against this. So anywho, I totally digressed on that. But after I got into this car accident, this money came, and my dad was in charge of all this money. So my mom sort of showed back up in my life a couple years later when I was 10. I moved in with her. Me and my brother both moved in with my mom and my stepdad. And I don't know, I just stayed. I lived there. I went to Latta, and it was just a whole different life than I was used to. I'd grown up in a whole different school system and household and whatnot. So I went and stayed there for 3 years. Then I went back to Bennettsville for a little while and decided I kind of wanted to do that. So I went back to Bennettsville and started going to Christian school and to church and all these sort of things. And I've always, I don't know why, and it sucks. It's sort of a blessing and a curse. It's more a curse for my family, but more a blessing for people that I just want to flip the switch on, honestly. But I've always been very out of sight, out of mind, and I don't know why I'm that way. Maybe it's something that I got from my mom. Who knows? Happy Mother's Day. Who knows? But I've always been very out of sight, out of mind. And it's, just if I don't see a person regularly, it's sort of like, I know you're there and I love you and I got love and everything, but I'm just somewhere else mentally. You know what I mean? I don't know if that makes any sense or not, but either way. So I sort of moved back to Bennettsville, and I didn't really bridge that gap very well, nor do I in any situation, as far as communication goes anyway. But I sort of started moving back and forth, and by the time that I was getting to be about 18, starting to drink a little bit, I started to party a little bit. Me and my brother both used to throw down back in the day. I understand he may be watching right now and he can validate all this. We used to get down back in the day, and it was a good time. And I learned how to do, I will say this too for my brother, who rarely ever do people who end up doing a lot of partying and such get to sort of learn from a person who's sort of a little more educated on this situation than you are, to sort of not just thrown into the pool, but somebody to lead you out and show you how to do the shit. I had a pretty good teacher, and I put those lessons to practice in Murrells Inlet for quite a long time, and they were legend. Just if I don't say so myself. But anyway, we're not talking about that. So I started having good times and started, partying or whatever. And I was working all the time, had all these dollars piled up, and I wasn't paying no rent or nothing. And I didn't have to, I don't know. I didn't have any expenses in my life. So I could afford to do, to party or have fun or whatever. So, kind of got addicted to that lifestyle and enjoyed that, but eventually ended up kind of going back to Bennettsville and graduating from the Christian school over my high school years. And all throughout this time, I'd been living with my mom and my stepdad off and on for a few years. And I sort of used to always see that she would always try to find a way to just argue or just be a mean person. And I just remember my stepdad would always just sit there in a chair quiet with his leg crossed, smoking a cigarette, like one after the other. I remember that, just sitting there, just saying nothing. And whenever he would say something, he would ask her to just drop it, and she never would. And it would just continuously go on. And then after a couple years of seeing that, I would sort of be like, he's trying to not argue and you just won't drop it. And then I would get in trouble for getting involved in that situation, which if somebody's ever been in a situation like that, you know what I'm talking about. But if you don't, it's awkward. It's very awkward. Like, I don't know. I didn't know what the root of the argument was about, but I could just see that one person was just kept nagging and trying to argue, and one was just trying to not, just, I don't know, be calm, I guess. I don't know. But, anywho, the time came around that I was about to be 18 years old. And when the money that I'd gotten from this car accident was supposed to be released to me at the age of 18 years old. So my mom had put a bug in my ear a while before about maybe if I gave some of that money to my stepdad that we could buy, and we had a used car lot, by the way, that we could buy more higher quality of cars, and that I would get $100 off of every car that came through the lot because they were using my money to do so, and that was going to be my investment. Now, I, despite my dad's better judgment and advice, did that and gave $50,000 to my mom or my stepdad. I gave it to my stepdad, and honestly, even this is crazy. I wrote the check to my stepdad because at that point I literally trusted him more than I did my mom, which is, I know, crazy, but I did that. And the funny thing is that after all was said and done, I'd given him that money. I was getting plenty of money back for a while, and then I started seeing cars come through the yard. And I know I've said all this before. If you've listened to that episode, I apologize. But those cars started coming through the yard, and I wasn't getting money for them. And I'm like, what's the deal? And apparently they had gotten money from somebody else at this point, and there was somebody else's dollars that they were using to buy these cars, so I wasn't getting a cut off of it because they weren't using my money, which didn't make sense. And I'm like, well, where's my money? And I realized at that point that I had sort of had a long con pulled on me. And for those of you who did not watch Lost, sorry, by the way, that you didn't watch Lost. And I'm sorry if you did watch Lost. That ending was kind of weird. But I had a long con pulled on me. I realized, I look back at the timeline as an adult, that my mom really didn't have much to do with me until there was a large sum of money that I would eventually come into, got involved. And I just look back at all that and realize what happened. So after she long conned me out of this 50 grand, she ended up basically blowing it all on going out to dinner and doing whatever have you. And all while my stepdad was in the hospital for a couple of months. And I'm pretty sure it was, I say a couple of months. I might be over exaggerating that in my mind, but it felt like a long time. And she ended up just blowing all this money, and he wasn't able to work to keep that reservoir replenished, basically. And it was just, after that, she couldn't afford to pay me back the money that I'd invested. So after my stepdad ended up getting out of the hospital, there was some hard issues, and over the years I'd already moved away to the beach by then, and I just sort of said fuck it, and I wasn't really worried too much about the money. I realized it wasn't going to come back to me, so who cares? But my stepdad ended up getting sick, and there were some rumors or stories going around that my mom had been having affairs on him left and right, and whenever he got sick, apparently she had taken some of his pain medication, and yeah, like I said, apparently had affair after affair, and left him well after he was diagnosed with cancer, and left my nephew, who adored her, my stepbrother and sister-in-law's son, and now she's living somewhere, being the same person that she always was. And just to be honest with you, Mother's Day sucks. for me. I know it's a good day for a lot of people, but it's not very fun for me. And it's because of all these things. And I get emotional, not necessarily like crying emotional, but just heated and angry, because if there's one thing that I hate in this world is a liar. And I cannot stand being lied to. I hate being lied to. Worse than anything in the world. And probably the only thing that may come close to being lied to in my book is being fooled or tricked, which is basically just a lie. And I hate like once I look back and I see something that's like, oh man, I really should have seen this. Like I don't know how I missed this. So I realized that I had been fooled, and I'm not a person that gets fooled. I've always looked at myself as somewhat a smarter person, and I know that's weird, isn't it? But I've always looked at myself as somebody who could figure things out and figure people out, but I guess that was just too close for me to see, and I was more in love with the idea of what mom was, and I guess, and I'm only assuming here because I don't know what goes on in my head half the time. I just heard myself say that. So, I don't know. I guess I was just engulfed by the idea of who she was. And then I actually looked back and saw who she actually was. And yeah, like looking back, and a Mother's Day comes around, and you know what? I know that she, and I know this makes me sort of sound bad, and I'm still gonna say it, and despite what people may think, but I know that she's sitting somewhere right now, probably just looking at her phone, hoping that she'll get a Happy Mother's Day message from me that will not come, because I felt so taken advantage of by the one person who is supposed to be the poster, and or basically the give you the guidelines of what your wife should be or what you should look for in, that's what a mother is, right? Doesn't a mother first show a man what a woman should be? Is that not what they are supposed to be? And I was just totally shafted from her on this whole situation. I was not given a good example from her, and that's what a mom is supposed to be, in my opinion. Now I could be wrong about this, and I'm sorry for that, but if I'm wrong, I do continuously apologize a lot because I don't want to offend anybody. God knows I don't want to be that guy, and that's a whole nother podcast. But I just I say all these things from my mindset now, looking back at my mom, but I didn't always feel this way. I didn't always think like this. Like, I loved my mom. I chose to go and stay with my mom against my dad's wishes, and I rebelled against my dad and my dad's family and my grandmother, my grandparents who actually raised me, and my Aunt Marie who actually raised me. I rebelled against all of them and went to live with my mom and stepdad and my stepbrother for and like against their wishes, and I totally rebelled against them. And I look back now and I see that what they were trying to do was coming from a good place. They were trying to protect me from something that they could see that I could not see yet. And not only that, but they were honorable enough people to not tell me these things. And I got nothing but respect for them for that, because instead of them coming to me and telling me all these things as a kid.